Wheeler Dealers ran for 18 seasons, and for nearly 2 decades it produced the kind of television that networks spend millions trying to manufacture and almost never achieve. Across more than 50 countries, millions of people sat down every week and watched two men do something the world had quietly stopped believing in. Find a neglected car on a tight budget, fix it properly, and sell it for a profit. No elimination rounds, no manufactured drama, no studio audience. Just a workshop, a set of tools, and the deeply satisfying process of car restoration. What nobody expected was that the show would outlast the partnership that built it, or that the people behind those cameras would each take such entirely different roads once the filming stopped. This is Wheeler Dealers in 2026, and what happened to its cast after the show moved on is harder to sit with than any engine failure they ever filmed. Before any of that, you need to understand what the show actually meant, because the ratings alone do not capture it. Wheeler Dealers launched on Discovery Channel in 2003 with car dealer Mike Brewer sourcing neglected used vehicles on a shoestring and mechanic Edd China handling the restoration work in the workshop, and the concept connected with audiences in a way that pure automotive content almost never does. At its peak, the show reached viewers in over 50 countries, spawned specials and spin-offs, relocated its production to the United States under the Velocity Network, and eventually returned to the United Kingdom for what became its longest continuous run. 18 seasons of uninterrupted programming, which Mike Brewer himself publicly called a real milestone. The show's power came from something specific. It treated the mechanical process as the point, not the backdrop, and that choice is what turned casual viewers into devoted fans who watched not just to be entertained, but to genuinely learn. Car restoration as reality television almost never works at that level. Wheeler Dealers did, and that success set up the collision that would eventually split its original partnership in two. When Velocity took over production after the move to the United States, the new network wanted changes, and Edd China's workshop sequences were the first thing on the table. Those segments, the most technically demanding content the show produced, were identified as too expensive and too complex to film under the new arrangement. The network's position was that the detailed mechanical coverage needed to be cut down significantly, replaced with simpler content that was easier and cheaper to turn around on schedule. China's response, delivered publicly in his own words in March of 2017, after 13 seasons and nearly 200 episodes, was that the workshop coverage represented the backbone and the core identity of the program, and that reducing it would change what Wheeler Dealers fundamentally was. And if that change was coming, he was not going to be part of it. So Edd China walked away. The fan response landed hard and fast, and in some corners it stayed that way for years. Speculation ran through forums and comment sections about whether a falling out with Mike Brewer had contributed, whether the official explanation covered the full story, whether China had been pushed rather than having chosen to leave. That ambiguity sat unresolved for a long time, feeding YouTube videos that collectively pulled in tens of millions of views from people who could not reconcile his absence with the show they'd spent years watching. And this is where it gets interesting, because what Edd China actually did next is the part of this story that gets the least attention. He took everything the network had decided wasn't worth the production budget, the depth, the mechanical detail, the genuine education, and built it into something that needed no network at all. His YouTube channel, Workshop Diaries, now sits at over 1 million subscribers and continues to grow, with Patreon support running alongside it for viewers who want even more access. The Grease Junkie brand, merchandise, the Edd Gear apparel line, Woos Performance car products, functions as a real and continuing business. His memoir, Grease Junkie, A Book of Moving Parts, topped the UK book charts when it came out. And his history of setting Guinness World Records, a pursuit that predated Wheeler Dealers by years and most recently produced the world's first all-electric ice cream van, kept going through all of it. The network had decided his approach was not commercially worth the effort. He went and proved otherwise, and he did it without anyone's platform or permission but his own. Now the man brought in to fill that space. Ant Anstead stepped into one of the harder television assignments imaginable, and what helped was that he could actually do the work. A trained mechanic with his own television history in the United Kingdom, well before Wheeler Dealers, he had fronted the series For the Love of Cars on Channel 4. Anstead brought real credibility into the workshop from the start. Over the seasons he spent alongside Mike Brewer, the chemistry between them developed into something that audiences genuinely responded to, and the show continued on. In some markets it grew. None of that prepared anyone for what came next in his personal life, and none of it happened quietly. Anstead married HGTV star Christina Hall in December of 2018. Their son Hudson arrived in September of 2019, and by September of 2020, the couple had announced their separation. The divorce finalized in June of 2021, and what followed pushed the story well beyond anything connected to car restoration or television. In April of 2022, Anstead filed an emergency custody order in Orange County, California, seeking full custody of Hudson and claiming that Hall spent fewer than 9 full days a month with their son, with additional allegations that she had included Hudson in paid social media content without his consent. The California family court judge denied that request, citing insufficient grounds for emergency intervention. Hall described the battle publicly as extremely unnecessary and said she had been in a very bad place during that period. The legal process ran through 2022, and that's when both sides reached a resolution: joint legal and joint physical custody of Hudson, shared between them going forward. The noise settled. Anstead, who had begun a relationship with actress Renee Zellweger during this period, started putting his energy somewhere different. He went back to England. A 500-year-old farmhouse in the United Kingdom, purchased for his parents to retire in, became the project, and a ramshackle barn on the property became the workshop. The plan was to restore classic cars and use the sale profits to fund the house renovation, and that plan became the series Ant Anstead, Born Mechanic, which premiered on Quest in the UK and landed as one of the network's top-performing new shows of 2025. As of January 2026, it had been renewed for a third season with an expanded order of 18 episodes, the biggest run the show had received to that point. It moves at the pace of a man who has stopped trying to do things at anyone else's speed, and the audience response has made it clear that speed was never really what people wanted from him anyway. A brief appearance alongside Christina Hall in the HGTV series The Flip-Off in late 2024 made headlines on its own because the fact that it happened at all said something about what time does to even the most publicly painful of divorces. Now, Mike Brewer, throughout the entire run of Wheeler Dealers, through Edd China's departure, through the US production period, through the return to the UK, through Ant Anstead's seasons, and everything that spilled off screen from them, Brewer remained the constant. He is the show's longest-running presence, and when questions about the future of Wheeler Dealers started circulating in the years after its most turbulent stretch, his answer was to get back to work. Reports of a possible cancellation had left the fan base genuinely uncertain. The spin-off dream car was quietly shelved, and for a window of time, the show's direction was not clear. That changed when Brewer confirmed in mid-2025 that 2 new series were in production and due to air in August, alongside a sequel to the Wheeler Dealers World Tour, a format that had already connected strongly with international audiences in its first run. Filming for that sequel was already underway in Spain and Germany when he confirmed it publicly. He posted from workshops in the Spanish heat, from airport lounges, from the exact kind of unglamorous working reality that has always been the show's most honest quality. His public reflection on 18 years of continuous programming, addressed to everyone who had worked on Wheeler Dealers in front of and behind the camera, read like someone who knew exactly what had been built and had no intention of letting it stop there. The show, now running with co-host Mark Priestley, a former McLaren Formula One mechanic, continues in 2026 with new episodes, a new World Tour series, and Mike Brewer still doing the job that made him. The Wheeler Dealers story is not over. Subscribe now, because next week the focus turns entirely to what Edd China has been building since he walked away, and in more detail than any other channel has covered. 3 men, 1 show, and a history that moved in directions none of them chose. What holds across all of them in 2026 is that each has landed doing exactly the work that reflected who they were before reality television ever found them. Mike Brewer is still dealing. Ant Anstead is in a barn in England, restoring cars to pay for his parents' retirement. And Edd China is in his own workshop, on his own schedule, teaching anyone who cares to watch how to do the job properly. Wheeler Dealers taught its audience that anything broken can be fixed, and the only question left is whether that applies to the show itself.